What's up, YouTube? NovaTempest 4892 here. I've got a brand new series for you. Welcome to Tempest Tutors. This is aimed at less experienced players of games I play, or those decently experienced but want to know a little bit more. Sort of a crash course of how things go on in these games that I play. For this first episode, we're going to be talking about World of Warplanes and how to, well, fire at anything and make sure you hit what you're firing at. If you like today's video, please leave a like, drop a comment, or if you're new, why not subscribe? Helps me out. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I believe the bell has just rung. Class is now in session. Let us begin. What even is a gun? What is it to gun? How is it to gun? What sizes are guns? What lengths are guns? What muzzle velocity is a gun? Can you throw a gun? All these questions, toss them out your brain. They don't matter here. For now, at least. Gunnery in World of Warplanes is fairly straightforward, but there are, of course, some nuances. You're here to learn those nuances. Sure, you can always just fly around, point and shoot at things with your mouse button or joystick or whatever you use, like this. But I'm sure you'd rather want to know how to do it right and to do it well. And you've come to the right place. The first thing about guns in World of Warplanes is that not every gun is equal. There are different shell sizes. They do different damage. They have different chances to cause fires or critical hits, all of which are good things if you intend to blow things out of the air or potentially blow things up on the ground, but we'll get to that later on. To start with, let's go over the first three shell types you're going to encounter in World of Warplanes. The first two are machine guns and 20mm to 15mm autocannons. This latter group varies in size a little bit here, but they all fall under the same category. And then later on, you start running into 30mm shells, and those are the nasty ones. Now, of course, each of these shell types have different accuracies. Allow me to demonstrate this right here. What you just saw was all three of the shell types we were just talking about. Machine guns, 20mm cannons, and 30mm shells. All three in succession. Now, let's see all three of them at the same time, side by side. Notice how these different shell types have different dispersions. This is a common theme. As you go along, you start seeing calibers, or I should say, sizes of rounds that are even larger. Tier 6, you start seeing things that are bigger than 30mm. 57s and whatnot, even 45s. These look like this. As you start to ascend into Period 3 aircraft, tiers 8 through 10, you will begin to see even more magical guns. These are revolver cannons, and they have much higher rates of fire than standard guns, and they can shred you. like a grater on cheese kind of shred. They come in both 20mm and 30mm sizes. Granted, the 20mm ones have a much higher rate of fire than the 30 ones. Here are those. However, there is one other gun that appears in Period 3, totally unique. Granted, this one stands out above the rest. It is a 20mm. However, it is a gun with such insane rate of fire that it blows everything else out of the water. I would like to introduce you to the F-94D's Vulcan. With that, we have covered basically all of the gun types that lie around in World of Warplanes. Now, we get to more technical things. The kind of things you need a wrench for. Not all guns are positioned in the same way. Some are mounted on wings, others are mounted in the fuselage. These two formats also have different aiming characteristics, as we can demonstrate right here. One thing to note is that most, if not all, aircraft with wing-mounted weapons have a little thing called convergence angling with their weapon. Well, what does that mean, you're probably asking? Well, it means that these weapons are angled in the wings so that when they fire, there is a certain distance that the bullets will all converge on a target. Aiming for this spot when engaging a target will usually improve your damage output significantly against said targets. It varies between different aircraft. From what I understand, for the most part, it's around 400 meters. This is notorious with the British Tier 10 heavy fighter, the Javelin, as its accuracy is not only fairly woeful with its wing-mounted weaponry, but because of that fact, firing at anything beyond that distance is usually an atrocious affair. Believe me, I have this aircraft, it is not that fun to engage targets beyond that range. I have even heard and tested for myself that turning the Javelin sideways, so that the wings are vertical when firing at a target, improves your odds of actually hitting the damn thing, which is extremely weird to think about. Anywho, those astute of you might have noticed something going on in the wings versus cowling accuracy clips we were just seeing earlier. I haven't bothered to cover it just yet because we hadn't really gotten to a good point, but now is the time. For the folks that may have been missing it, let me show you folks a clip where I emphasize that certain thing that some of you may have seen. Right there. Unlike in some games where there is supposedly limited ammunition, instead, for the firearms in World of Warplanes, they require trigger discipline, as they can overheat. And when weapons overheat, they don't shoot, which means you lose firepower until they cool down. Let me give you an example of the differences between guns there. Let's take an even closer look at that, shall we? Jumping back to the accuracy issue in World of Warplane's firearms, there are indeed ways to improve said accuracy of the weapons. You can use equipment. You could use some certain pilot skills. I'll show you some of these here right now. So here's my hanger. These pilot skills will be useful for accuracy. Marksman 1. And then once you get enough pilot points, Marksman 2. These are useful for maneuvering combat or for if your guns misbehave. Then in terms of equipment, another piece of equipment to aid in accuracy of your weapons is this gun sight right here. These impact things differently. Let me demonstrate for you. Now you know that different guns in World of Warplanes have different dispersion ratings, have different heat cycles, have different mounting locations, be it on the wings or the cowling, but as I said, not every gun is equal. This also includes gun ranges. When you are flying in World of Warplanes, the HUD will give you hints of this. When in a battle in World of Warplanes, there will be distance indicators towards targets. Air defense aircraft, enemy aircraft, so on and so forth. When your weapons are in firing range, this distance indicator turns red. Typically, it is not a good idea to start firing the second this indicator turns red. Oftentimes, it is better to start firing within a few hundred feet or meters lower than this. So, say your indicator turns red at 800. Once it turns to 600, then start shooting. Or a little less, preferably. This is especially the case for mixed caliber, or I should say mixed gun type aircraft. A perfect example of this kind of aircraft is the 109 EMIL, with its mixture of machine guns and autocannons. This aircraft, while it can reach ranges up to 600, 700 meters, the optimal firing range is 400 or so. Other aircraft have massive gun ranges. The entire Yak-9 I-215 line, for instance, feature cannons that have a over 1 kilometer range. In terms of World of Warplanes, bullet physics is extremely simplified. Gravity does not apply, so you don't have to worry about that. However, you do have to at least account for the speed of your shells versus the speed of the aircraft you're shooting at, as well as its position, flying angle, and its momentum, a few other different things. I know, that sounds really complicated. Don't worry, I created a little diagram for you. And this is it. This formula equates the exact way, in a simple form, to lead a target, and when you fire at said target, your shells will in fact connect to that target. Now, I can't say this will guarantee the fact, but this basically describes what's really going on, in World of Warplanes at least, for the most part. Let's break down what all this means. At the top, we have characteristics of your target. First is speed. As you go higher up in tiers, speed generally increases. That means if you go from period 1 to period 3 aircraft, you might get a little jarred with your lead, but this happens a little more often than you think. So don't worry too much about that. However, you do need to keep that speed in mind, as the higher the speed, the more you have to add to the lead a little bit. Next is momentum. This is a little more complex than the actual speed of the aircraft. If an aircraft is going fast but straight, that's easier to lead. However, if they're doing something, say, I don't know, a barrel roll, this complicates your aim a little bit. You do have to change the direction of your aim relative to the motion of the aircraft, not its path. Those are two different things. With the motion of the aircraft, let's give an example. Say you are going head-to-head with an aircraft, and this other aircraft suddenly pulls into a barrel roll as an evasive maneuver. Rather than still aiming at the general path of the aircraft, which is straight towards you, you have to aim for where the momentum of the maneuver is carrying the aircraft. So, for instance, it might be off a little bit to the side of the path, or a little bit up to the left. It depends on the momentum of the aircraft. Let me give a demonstration. The next element is range. The further away the aircraft is from your position, the more you have to lead the guns a little bit, depending on the shell velocity of your weaponry. This can make aircraft doing a barrel roll much harder to hit when it's really far away. Therefore, you kind of want to try to take shots when they are flying straight rather than taking wild maneuvers. Next, we have the bottom half, which covers what you are doing. First is shell velocity, which is the speed of the rounds coming out of your weapons. These differ by gun types. There's a lot of them. The faster, the better. But there are some that are really powerful, but are really painfully slow, which means you have to lead quite a significant amount depending on the aircraft we're talking here. A notorious example is the 109Z or the BF-109K6. These two are notorious because of their 30mm cannons that are MK-108s, which are notoriously sluggish. Let me give a demonstration. And finally, this one's more of a broader term, but it technically should be two different elements, is firing angles. One is your position relative to your target. If you're underneath, you have to aim a little differently. If you're above, it's easier. It depends on where you are relative to your target. It can shift your aim a little bit. The other part of this is the angling of the weapons themselves. This is more of a hidden thing. Not all of them are like this, but there are some exceptional examples. Again, I will point to the 109Z, as its weaponry is supposedly aimed downward, or I should say angled downward slightly. Which means if you turn the plane upside down and fire at aircraft, there's a tendency for more shells to land on the target, which is kind of odd if you ask me. With all of that said, let's finally take a look at some footage that will provide some examples for you. I'm not going to guarantee you're going to instantly master gunnery with some of these clips, but I'll try to break down things a little bit for you so that you can sort of digest, based on what you just learned, what I'm doing. So here I am electing to engage a Yak-9U, a sniper plane. Bot-controlled sniper planes are particularly dangerous, so I want to get rid of this aircraft before it becomes a problem later on. Notice how I've already begun to move into firing position against this target. I also have to take into account the shell velocity of my weapons. I am currently flying a Mustang, which means it uses total machine gun armament. Machine guns are not super fast in terms of shell velocity, but they do usually get the job done. You just have to lead into the right spot. There is also convergence with these weapons. They have to be aimed just at the right spot for maximum effectiveness, which, based on the range, should be somewhere around here. Now, unfortunately, I didn't cause a fire on this target, which means it's likely not going to burn to death, so I'm going to have to come back around to engage again. I would show this follow-up part, however, we're focusing on gunnery. That involves more dogfighting, which we will cover in another class. That said, we will move on to the next clip. This time around, I'm flying a TA-152. This aircraft is in fact a sniper plane, however, instead of one cannon, it packs 3 30mm cannons. I have my sights on a specialized ME-262 that is going to fly directly above me and past me right here. I intend to intercept this player. However, I am below his own position. That means I have to do a Immelman turn up to his position in order to get a good clean shot on his 6 o'clock, or his tail, to those that don't know that. With some low rate of fire weapons, like the ones on this TA-152, it is a good idea to perform test shots. If your test shot lands, then it is time to go all in with your shots, based on the aim of your test shot that was successful. Let's see what happens. Notice how my very first test shot, which actually was pretty damn lucky, landed on my target. Now I have to capitalize on that. However, I have to keep in mind that my target is constantly shifting position, which means I have to constantly relocate that sweet spot to make sure I continue to hit my mark. Knife range fights with sniper aircraft like the TA-152 are very, very annoying. This is in due part to the game engine as well as the physics of the game, and coding and a few other things. At these sort of distances, when you fire a shell and it suddenly seems to disappear as though it has hit your target, at least from my understanding, the shell has actually missed. However, if it goes right by your target, usually that causes a hit, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. The devs would probably have to explain that. Not that they would, understandably, but either way. Here is the BF-109Z. I am currently descending on a ground attack aircraft. I have selected this as my target. I have to keep in mind, as I said before, these slow shells of these cannons. This means I have to lead the target harder. However, this aircraft is slow that I'm engaging. So, I won't have to worry too much about leading my shots very far ahead of the target I am engaging. I also have to take into account the slight downward angle of the 109Z's cannons. This means I have to compute all of this together in order to get a good strafing run on this ground attack aircraft. If I do this right, I could take out this aircraft in a single pass. Let's see just how well I do. Even with some higher rate of fire weapons, it is still a good idea to do test shots. Here, I recognize that my shells are not doing a whole lot of damage. This could be because some of the shells that I'm firing at this aircraft are actually missing, rather than connecting, while a couple are landing on the target. So that means I have to shift the aim just a little bit to maximize the damage output against this target. Let's observe the correction I make. Notice how I also kept in mind the heat cycles of my cannons. If I had overheated the cannons, that might have caused issues with getting rid of that ground attack aircraft in good order. This is a universal thing with World of Warplanes. Trigger discipline, lead, aim time, all these different things combine to make a good attack run on other aircraft. On to the next example I have for you. This is my ME-262 HG2. I am currently in the process of descending upon another HG2 that I have selected as my target. With the high speeds involved of both of these aircraft, I'm going to have to perform a few test shots, perhaps, in order to get my shots lined up to delete this aircraft from the sky. Let's observe how this goes. Notice how I am only firing 2 bursts at a time. This is a perfect example of how to take test shots on a target.
Our military base is launching strikes on the enemy. This will make things easier for you. Stay alert, pilots. Large enemy force spotted over the airfield. We've taken...
Now, it is not impossible to chain targets. As you can see what I'm about to do here, I have switched from dealing with this HG2 that I just took care of to a J7W2. The only thing that purely matters is your ability to quickly lock on to your targets. That is all that matters. How fast you're able to do that determines how fast you are able to chain targets, like in this instance, for example.
Get over the forward airfield. Nice work.
Our final clip here is of the F4U-1 Corsair. I am currently above a Focke-Wulf A5, which I have selected as my target. However, his position is going to be shifting dramatically based on my own position and my direction of movement. Therefore, in order to keep my weaponry locked onto target, I'm going to have to move my position to match his so that my guns remain trained on him. Let's see how I do that. This is a good stopping point here for leading into dogfighting. That will be in a future class, but for now, let us stay on target with our focus on gunnery. As you just saw, I kept my lead on my target even through movement, through the shift of the rotation of my aircraft, through the pulling up of my aircraft from a downward descent toward the ground, and then leveling out, I finished off my target. This is, by definition, a perfect follow-through of a target you are engaging. With this, that concludes our sample reel for today's class. And with that, that should be everything I could have possibly covered within the realm of gunnery in World of Warplanes. Now, of course, I may have missed a few things. If I did, please leave a comment on the comments section about that. I do plan to create a secondary class that will be a catch-all for things I may have missed in this episode of Tempest Tutors. With this class now under your belt, you should feel like you are now certified as a trained gunner in World of Warplanes. Congratulations. Now, get out there, shoot down some planes, make yourself proud, make yourself better. I will catch you all in the next one. Class is hereby dismissed.